My name is Justin Lentz, and this is Nicole Fishbein. We are here to talk about some sophistication or possibly even a missed opportunity for a threat actor as we analyze some long-term exploitation and persistence in 0 days that just didn't really seem to have the impact we were looking for. So we will be kind of posing some questions to you guys. A little bit about us. I'm a threat hunt lead at CFC Response, or Solis Security. And I also am a homebrewer and hobbyist in my free time.
I'm a senior security researcher at Intezer. I do reverse engineering and malware analysis. And before that, I did embedded research and development.
Our agenda today, we're going to be talking about the background of XE Group, a little bit of what's available and what we know about them, some past activity from that group, the blind spots that we have, and unveiling the new and undetected campaign that we discovered, along with 2 0 days that we had published, and more about the web shells and some of their activity that we saw, and then finishing up with really that missed opportunity question mark. Why did it kind of look this way?
So first of all, we want to show you what knowledge base that we had when we started our research collaboration. And that was basically all the public information that was published about the XE Group. The first report was published in 2020. And it just was a report about an ongoing campaign for credit card skimming that abused non-vulnerability in progress Telerik UI, which is basically a component for generating interactive objects. And at the time, the threat actors used the vulnerability to deploy malicious web shells, to send malicious code, to do credit card skimming, and credential theft. At the time, the unique thing about this campaign was that it exploited ASP.NET, which was not very common in 2020. Thanks. So the next report actually mentions the group. And this is an in-depth campaign, in-depth analysis of the campaigns that they saw. They were able to spot more campaigns of credit card skimming and credential theft that used web shells and reverse shells. But because they saw so many ongoing campaigns, they had more evidence and more indicators. So they were able to link them together between themselves as an infrastructure and link it to the group. So they also used DNS records and WHOIS records, and were able to find more information about maybe the people that are behind the group. So first of all, they were able to say that the group is probably active since 2013. And also, they collected all the reverse shells and the scripts in these campaigns and realized that the group is kind of self-branding and naming their scripts and tools with the XE basically word. And one more thing is that they connected this infrastructure and the group back to Vietnam. So then in 2023, CISA publishes an advisory saying that an APT group and XE Group exploited different known vulnerabilities in progress Telerik UI to deploy malicious code. And they were able to exploit servers of the US government. So essentially, we see a step up from credit card skimming. Now they're collecting information, doing sort of working against another nation and exploiting more known vulnerabilities. The last public report about the group was published in 2023. And this report is very interesting because, first of all, they say that the group is doing a supply chain attack. Now they're exploiting more known vulnerabilities in e-commerce platforms to do, again, credit card skimming and credential theft. And another thing that was very interesting in this report is the OSINT research about the group. So with the email addresses that we saw in the previous report, And with more evidence that the researchers at Menlo Security are able to collect, they got more aliases and more email addresses and the Instagram page that we saw in the previous slide of a persona that is probably part of the group or behind the group itself. So at this point, what we know about the group is that their infrastructures and domains are very well connected with their self-branding name. And they usually do web credit card skimming, credential theft. We see them kind of trying something else with espionage on another nation, but they usually do it using known vulnerabilities and reverse rep shells and malicious code. So if we want to summarize what we know about the group at the time, we have basically the reports from 2020 to 2023. And then actually, thanks to the last report and Menlo, because they were able to find more information about the personas behind the group, they found another GitHub repo of a malicious auto-hit script back from 2010. So we have two gaps. What happened to the group from 2010 to 2020? We don't have this visibility, we don't know. And also what happened after 2023. So at this point, we are in 2024, that's when we started our research.
So pivoting into kind of the recent developments, it all began with an alert back in November of 2024, where we see PowerShell launching and some suspicious commands, net commands, discovery commands, and an attempted interpreter shell originating from the worker process of the IIS server. For those that know, right away, that's triggering web shell in my mind, and so it's something that we started to dig into. The interpreter attempt seemed to be unsuccessful. We see them trying to exfiltrate a bunch of config files via a script, and I'm assuming in most cases where I've seen this is it's trying to gather credentials, and usually there's some sort of SAML credentials or other credentials in some of these config files for different service accounts when you're running web applications. And so we see them taking these, a lot of discovery commands, trying to enumerate the network and see what else exists. And that was kind of when we contained and put a stop to the activity and then started to kind of dig back in. Looking closer at the web shell itself, it had quite a bit of capabilities, a lot of network scanning capabilities, command to execution. It could run SQL queries to basically access databases on the server. There was a lot of pre-built queries built into that. So we have a report that we had published back in February that goes into much more detail on the web shells, the analysis of the interpreter, and the different things that happened. And then some of the interesting aspects is that there was a user agent string validation function within that web shell to validate a string of TM today. Tracing that backwards, we saw other activity going all the way back to actually 2020 in January, and that was the earliest activity where we see them uploading their first web shell. There was additional activity kind of in between that, but there was some variations with a different web shell that they actually deployed in 2020 that seemed to be using a variation of ASPX spy, and there's a few variations that were very similar that you can find on GitHub. And the user agent string validation still existed, but it was different. And it had this zthan, zgroups, and it was a little bit different to see that changing over time, but still their capability for command and control and persistence remained mostly the same. So, how did they actually drop the web shell? Well, this is where our first vulnerability comes in. It started with a SQL injection flaw that they were able to actually dump credentials from the web server itself by running or exploiting this SQL injection to use the PM session 1 parameter and in the error message, it was spitting out a username and password. And so they were actually able to dump the username and password directly from the database through this timeout warning endpoint on the server. And so this was their initial attempt, where we see them running a few different exploits, and then this one successfully actually in the IIS logs. We see the username and password results right in the query information, and that was where they got access. Following that, the next vulnerability that we found, which allowed them to actually upload their web shell, did require authentication, but now because they were able to dump the credentials, they had admin account that they could log into that web server with, and they accessed the application and started poking around. Eventually they stumbled across this upload.aspx endpoint, where they started testing by just uploading a JPEG file and then fetching that JPEG file and realizing that, hey, it works. And so then they followed by trying to upload a few different web shells. Some of them didn't work right away until they uploaded the one that we kind of talked about with the ASPX spy functionality, and they went from there to start looking at configs. The interesting aspect of what we were seeing in 2020 is it was very more manual enumeration, grabbing one config at a time, enumerating through the file system via the web shell, and not actually having strong knowledge of that web application and what they were really after, it seemed. So with that, there was very heavy activity in 2020, kind of through January to March, but then a big gap. They kind of made some requests, touched the web shell again a couple times in 2022, and then 2023, we see them actually upload a new web shell. And this is the same one that was leveraged all the way through November of 2024. And this gave us actually a lot more visibility, being able to see in the GET requests that we could see what they're actually trying to fetch, while the original web shell did not give us that visibility. So I thank them very much for doing so, because we had a lot more information to go on in our investigation to see exactly what they were kind of trying to touch and interact with. One of the other interesting aspects is their user agent strings did vary quite a bit throughout the 4-year time span that we investigated. There was a couple mistakes where they clearly forgot to change their user agent, or however they were making requests, it was different, and then they were trying to access the web shell with a very basic user agent string that didn't have this, and then they quickly realized it and shifted to make sure that they were using the right one. And so that was definitely interesting, kind of a little bit of a fail, but with user agents, that's not something that we were able to heavily pivot on to really track anything back further than that. But one of the big things with this, as we see the variations in the web shells, is that we start to see them using this TM today actually earlier on before the other web shell, and then there was a lot of combination where they had both the TM today and the ZThan Z groups, and so it clearly shows that there may be additional web shells that they're using or other functionality that is giving them, making sure that they're using a user agent string that is compatible with multiple versions of their web shells. So kind of talking about the vulnerability disclosure, as we mentioned, we did publish the vulnerabilities and tried to work with the vendor and to get those published. This was actually a little bit of a painful process because the vendor was very unresponsive, did not have any kind of vulnerability disclosure process in place. So it was trying to work with the client that had been compromised, that had direct contact with the vendor, having calls with the vendor, and specifying, hey, we're going to wait this long, here's what we found, passing that information along, trying to also responsibly get CVE numbers issued through MITRE. But it was definitely a challenge, and even looking at patch release notes for the vendor, it was not very clear if you were a customer that there was actually an issue that they had patched. After the CVEs were released, they did go and just insert them into their release notes and say, oh yeah, by the way, this was patched. But there was never something of hey, this is a problem, go and patch this, make sure you're updated. I'm not familiar with their update process. Maybe all the servers have auto updates. I don't know. But that was a little bit concerning to see that software vendors are not doing as good of a job as they could be in this realm, especially when there's companies out there trying to do responsible disclosure and help them patch and fix things. So this does have the full disclosure timeline. It's also in our paper as well, but this kind of highlights that like it did take a while to try to like continue to work with the vendor, stressing that it was not easy to really get the vendor to want to move forward to get this published in a way that they could fix it and that they could let their customers know and people aware of the issue so that they could make sure that if they're using the software, it was patched.
So essentially at this point, we can complete our timeline, at least until now. So we have that new activity in 2024, but we see that they used an all web shell from 2020. So now the question is, in 2020, we thought they're doing just credit card skimming, but here they are expanding and trying something new. So what exactly changed? What happened? And that makes this campaign different because we see a new sort of a target. We see the manufacturing distribution sector being targeted by the group versus the e-commerce. So what exactly changed? Why the pivot? Then we have the credit card skimming in the past, but now they're after deployment of new tools and targeting information theft. So again, the question is, are they objective changing, or maybe they always did kind of both and we're just missing it? And in my opinion, the biggest question is, how do you go from exploiting known vulnerabilities into exploiting 0 days? I mean, with what Justin just presented, it doesn't look like a very sophisticated group, but did they buy these vulnerabilities, or did they hire someone to research them and exploit them? It's not clear. And lastly, the question of why keep the exposed environment for 4 years and do practically nothing with it. So first of all, it also shows some sort of sophistication, but also raises more questions about the group, how they operate. Maybe they got a new task, maybe they forgot about it. We have so many questions after this campaign, and it is kind of showing that while we think that we know a threat actor, we have like this new campaign that throws us off a bit.
Yeah, so really tying back to that sophistication, or is it really that missed opportunity? We had talked about it a lot. We had talked with a lot of other researchers and folks that had visibility into the groups and other threat intel organizations to try to really understand this and try to really understand the motives behind the threat actor, kind of questioning like, hey, is this espionage, right? They seem to be not chasing after a financial impact for the client. With the software that they had exploited, it was a warehouse management software that didn't really align with being able to do the credit card skimming that is really in the MO of this actor. And then maybe it was really just a failed attempt, like they stumbled across the vulnerability and didn't know what to do with it next because it didn't align with what they did on their day-to-day. But kind of, is it just, hey, we have access and they kept it around to say maybe in the future we can leverage this and just keep holding on to it? And it's quite possible that the activity that we saw in 2024 was them finally taking action that was put to a stop before they could actually make real impact. So reevaluating the prior research, it's very similar that the same threat operation in what they were targeting to exploit in a way, but it's has very different impact and the significant differences in how they really tried to achieve their objectives on the attack. And what's missing in our puzzle is what was their goals behind exploiting this server? Was it exploited more widely than this one client? because they had clearly, from 2020 to 24, developed their capability to quickly identify and exfiltrate all of the configs with a simple script file versus in 2020 doing it very manually. So that suggests that they're operationalizing this threat to exploit more of those same servers for other customers and other victims. The clear understanding of the group structure, there's still critical pieces missing that we're trying to understand to see if there is more sophistication, if it's collaboration with more than one threat actor group, or if it's really just we're thinking too difficult about it and it's just one of those, hey, they got access and didn't know what to do with it, and kind of just left it in their back pocket. I think the really stumping aspect is we didn't find any other intelligence reporting or knowledge about them using more advanced malware beyond the web shells and credit card skimming. In all of the history that we know about the group, it was very much heavy on web shells that would lead to credit card skimming, while this one now we see the shift to web shells that led to interpreter malware, initial discovery that could have led to potential lateral movement within the environment if it were to still have proliferated. So the final takeaways, we really want vulnerability disclosure with software vendors to be highlighted, that it needs improvement. And I think this is more targeting smaller software vendors, that they need to be willing to work with customers, and their third-party vendors and partners to ensure that things can get patched and things can be handled. No one wants to point fingers, but we want to solve a problem. And so if it's identified for one customer, let's fix it for everyone. And then our understanding of the group is missing critical information. And so we want to kind of put feelers out there and try to see, hey, what's missing? Has anyone else seen this? And the goals of the group are still a little bit unknown, and so we definitely encourage more collaboration to help identify this and see if there's more things that we need to track down around this group. Thank you for listening to our talk. If there's any questions.